The air around love and marriage, Huntsville had shifted. What once felt like Martell Holt's kingdom now felt like a battlefield he no longer controlled. The confidence that used to radiate from him, the swagger that made him the center of attention, had started to fade. And standing just outside that chaos was Carlos King, calm, sharp, and fully aware of the storm brewing before his eyes. This time, Carlos wasn't just the producer. He was the messenger. And the message he sent would change everything for Martell. It wasn't loud or public at first. It was subtle, deliberate, and devastating, a scathing wake-up call meant to remind Martell that no one, not even him, is bigger than the show. Carlos had seen this pattern before, stars rising fast, forgetting who helped them build their stage, then falling just as quickly when they tried to fight the hand that fed them. And Martell, for all his charm and presence, was now walking that same path. For years, he'd been the face of love and marriage, Huntsville, the man fans loved to watch, whether cheering or shaking their heads in disbelief. But over time, the power he once wielded started to crumble, and Carlos could feel the tension growing behind the cameras. Martell's arrogance wasn't just hurting his image, it was hurting the show itself. And Carlos King was not about to let that happen. To understand why this moment was so powerful, you have to go back to where it all began. Before the cameras, before the scandals, before the endless internet debates, there was just Martell and Melody Holt, the ambitious couple from Huntsville who had a dream. Together, they pitched the idea that would become one of OWN's biggest reality hits. Love and Marriage, Huntsville wasn't just another show, it was a movement. It gave viewers a glimpse into the lives of successful Black couples balancing business, marriage, and loyalty in a world that often demanded perfection. At the heart of it all were Martell and Melody, the power pair who represented love, ambition, and partnership. But behind those smiles, cracks were forming. The marriage that once looked picture perfect was slowly breaking down, and soon, their private pain became public entertainment. Martell's affair, the scandal that would redefine his life, turned him into the show's anti-hero overnight. Viewers who once admired him began to question his every move. His confidence started looking more like pride, his words more like excuses. Melody, meanwhile, transformed that pain into power, stepping into her independence with grace and determination. She became the woman everyone rooted for, while Martell became the man everyone wanted to see humbled. And somewhere in between, Carlos King was watching it all unfold, both as a producer and as someone who understood the cost of fame. For a while, Martell refused to believe he had lost control. He still saw himself as the star, the reason people tuned in. But the world around him had changed. Melody was shining brighter than ever. The audience's sympathy had shifted. And Carlos King, who had once treated Martell as the heartbeat of the show, started to make moves that hinted at something deeper. Cast introductions changed. Camera angles shifted. Entire storylines began focusing on other couples, new faces, and new drama. It was subtle at first, but to anyone paying attention, it was clear the center of gravity in Huntsville was no longer Martell Holt. But here's the twist: Carlos didn't just remove Martell from the spotlight. He made him feel it. That's how producers like Carlos send messages. Not through confrontation, but through silence, through editing, through moments that remind even the loudest voice that they can be quieted. During the latest taping, insiders say Carlos orchestrated scenes that forced Martell to face his reflection, not the polished version he wanted the world to see, but the reality everyone else already saw. Cast members challenged him. Old wounds were reopened. And for once, Martell didn't have the last word. The man who used to dominate every reunion suddenly looked cornered. It wasn't random. It was intentional. Carlos knew Martell had reached a point where nothing less than a harsh truth would work. For months, Martell had been drifting, showing up late to shoots, arguing with producers, and refusing to take accountability for how his own choices were reshaping his image. Carlos tried patience. He tried guidance. But patience runs out when ego steps in. So instead of sitting Martell down for another private talk, Carlos crafted an episode that spoke louder than any meeting ever could. He built a mirror out of reality TV, and Martell had to stare straight into it. The tension reached its peak when the cast came together for what should have been a routine filming session. What nobody expected was that Carlos would personally step on set that day. He usually watched from the control room, orchestrating drama from behind the scenes. But this time, he wanted to be seen. The crew grew quiet when he walked in. Even Martell, who prided himself on being unshakable, looked uneasy. Carlos didn't raise his voice or call him out directly. Instead, he spoke to the entire cast about accountability, professionalism, and the importance of understanding that the show was bigger than any one person. His words weren't aimed at Martell by name, but everyone knew exactly who the message was for. "Some people forget how they got here," Carlos said calmly. "They forget the doors that were opened for them, and they start thinking the world owes them something. But this platform doesn't belong to anyone. It's a privilege, not a right." The silence that followed was heavy. Martell looked down, his jaw tight. That was the wake-up call, and it hit him harder than any argument or online rumor ever could. Carlos didn't embarrass him. He didn't scold him. He just reminded him of a truth Martell had been running from: the show could and would move on without him. And that's exactly what started happening. When the new episodes aired, fans immediately noticed the shift. Martell's screen time was cut down. His once dominant storylines were replaced with the lives of other cast members. Viewers began to see more of Melody's growth, Kimmy's emotional journey, and the Scott family's complicated dynamic. Meanwhile, Martell's moments felt shorter, colder, and more fragmented, as if the editing itself was telling a story of its own. Social media lit up with speculation. Did Carlos King just ice Martell out? One fan wrote. Another said, "It feels like Martell's being benched." And behind those comments, Carlos King said nothing. He didn't need to. What nobody expected was that this quiet removal would hit Martell harder than any public fight. The man who once commanded the spotlight was now fighting just to be seen. For someone like Martell, that kind of invisibility is worse than criticism. It's a producer's way of saying, "You're not essential anymore." And for the first time, Martell felt what it was like to be replaceable, a feeling he'd made others experience for years. The fallout was immediate. Insiders claimed Martell started calling production more often, asking about filming schedules, storylines, even future plans for his character arc. He wanted to know why his scenes were being cut, why interviews were being cancelled, why his promotional shots weren't front and center anymore. But Carlos kept it professional. No arguments. No explanations. Just a gentle reminder, this is about the story, Martell. Not the ego. Behind closed doors, it was said that Carlos tried to offer Martell one last chance to redeem himself, a storyline that would have allowed him to show growth, reflection, and maybe even humility. But Martell struggled to play that role. His pride wouldn't let him. Instead, he doubled down, posting cryptic messages on Instagram, implying betrayal, hinting that people behind the scenes were trying to destroy his image. Fans recognized the tone, the same defensive energy that had cost him public sympathy before. And once again, the internet started choosing sides. But this time, the majority wasn't on Martell's side. Even longtime supporters began to admit that he'd gone too far, that maybe it was time he faced the consequences of his own choices. Meanwhile, Carlos continued building the show around new energy, fresher storylines, unexpected alliances, and emotional journeys that kept fans hooked. And quietly, that was the real message: you can be replaced, but the show will never stop. By the next reunion, the shift was undeniable. Carlos sat in his producer's chair, watching as Martell tried to defend himself, his voice trembling with frustration. The man who once dominated the stage was now being challenged by almost everyone around him. Melody's composure, Kimmy's honesty, and even the Scott's confidence made Martell look smaller, more desperate. Every time he tried to control the narrative, someone else interrupted him with a reality check. It was like watching a man realize, in real time, that the power he thought he had was gone. What hurt the most wasn't just losing the spotlight, it was losing Carlos's respect. Because no matter how chaotic things got, Martell always believed that Carlos had his back. But now, that trust was fractured. Carlos had stopped protecting him. He was no longer editing Martell's mistakes into sympathy. He was showing them as they were. And that raw honesty, that unfiltered exposure, was the most painful lesson of all. Fans could feel the difference too. The energy in Martell's scenes felt off, like a man trying to fight against a current he couldn't control. Viewers weren't angry anymore, they were almost sad. It was the kind of downfall that didn't need words. It was written in his eyes, in the pauses between his sentences, in the weight of his silence. Carlos King had done what few producers could. He had delivered a lesson through storytelling, not confrontation. And the message was loud and clear: humility is the price of survival. As weeks passed, Martell tried to bounce back. He posted motivational quotes, hinted at new business ventures, and even teased the idea of rebranding himself. But the audience wasn't convinced. The damage had been done. His wake-up call had already been broadcast for the world to see. And whether he liked it or not, the story had moved forward without him at its center. What makes this moment so haunting is how it mirrors real life. Carlos King didn't destroy Martell, he just stopped protecting him. He gave him the chance to face himself. And sometimes, that's more brutal than any public humiliation. It's the quiet realization that the empire you thought you built alone was never really yours to begin with. As the cameras faded out on another dramatic season, Carlos stood in the shadows of the set, satisfied but thoughtful. He knew what he'd done wasn't cruel, it was necessary. He'd seen too many stars lose themselves to ego, too many shows crumble under pride. This was his way of keeping the machine alive, of reminding everyone, even Martell, that reality TV may look like chaos, but behind it all, there's always a plan. And for Martell Holt, the message had finally sunk in. The days of being untouchable were over. The era of unchecked arrogance had ended. What lay ahead was uncertain redemption, maybe, if he could swallow his pride and start over. But one thing was certain: Carlos King had sent the wake-up call, and Martell had no choice but to answer it. Because in Huntsville, the real drama isn't just what happens on screen, it's what happens when the cameras stop rolling, and reality finally catches up.